Asato ma sadagamaya tamaso homaham jyotirgamaya mrityormam amritam gamaya avir maedhi Rudra yate dakshinam mukham te namaham pahi nityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. And reach us through and through ourselves. And evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. I get a little... My subject this morning is the mystery of human vibrations. And this morning we are not going to be talking about soul, God, or religion, but rather about thought force, auras, psychospheres, power places, and in the study of the lives of the saints, in fact, we'll come across many such phenomena. Our background subject this morning is all about the theory of vibrations. This theory of vibration is an esoteric, pre-modern, pre-scientific theory that nevertheless gives us a naturalistic explanation that forms the background presupposition for many of the manners and customs and popular beliefs of religious people around the world. So let's get right into it. Talking about vibrations. A vibration is a pattern of repeated movement, kind of a reciprocal movement, forward and backward, or up and down. And you can think maybe of some musical instruments like a drum, vibrating up and down. You can think of a bell. Everything in the world is like a bell. When it is struck, it rings. A bell rings. That is, there's a reciprocal vibration. Think about the washing machine in your home. You watch the washing machine as it goes round and round. It's going through a cycle, but it's a regular, repetitive motion, and you'll see that it vibrates. It's causing a vibration. Open up the hood of your car, look at the engine. And you can see the engine, you'll see the whole engine is vibrating. And that's because all of the parts in the engine are moving in a regular, repetitive patterns. They repeat over and over again, and they cause that vibration. Everything in the universe vibrates The law of vibration states that everything in the universe, from the smallest atom to the whole earth itself, is in a state of vibration. In fact, the universe, before even the universe began, we read in the Katha Upanishad, Yadidam kincha jagat sarvam prana ejati nisritam. That is, this whole universe was created from the very beginning by the vibrations of the prana. That is, of subtle matter and energy. Vibration in the highest sense is really a struggle for existence. It's a struggle for being. Every monon, that is, every unit of being, is in a constant struggle for its existence. It is impacted by forces from outside. It's acted upon. And of course, for every action, there is a reaction. And so it's action and reaction. And to exist is to resist. And that existence and that resist, action and reaction, that's vibration. And this morning, we are talking particularly about human vibrations. Subject is the mystery of human vibrations. The subject contains the word mystery. See, the Vedanta, students of Vedanta, they don't like that word. We don't like mystery. We like light and knowledge. Mystery is the antithesis of science. The word that's the opposite of scientific is mysterious. So that's why my purpose this morning is to try to demystify some of this phenomena that we read in the lives of the saints and the sages. But our subject is, we're talking about human vibrations. And the vibrations of a drum and a bell and an engine and all that are very well understood and studied by different branches of physics. Human vibrations, though, is a little more esoteric. By human, of course, vibrations, we mean, when we talk about human, we mean what makes us human is our thought, our mind. And so when we're talking here, particularly human vibrations, we mean thought vibrations. And according to the Sankhya philosophy, if you remember Swami Vedarupananda, gave several important full lectures on the Sankhya philosophy. And very helpful for us to understand that philosophy in order to understand the Vedanta philosophy. The two go kind of like a scaffolding to help us to understand the Advaita teachings of the Advaita Vedanta. According to the Sankhya philosophy, thoughts are things. Thoughts are material things. Thoughts are like rocks, or like stones. In this sense, that in the Sankhya system, there's no mind-body dualism. That is, there's no dualism between mind and matter. That mind and matter, it's a continuous spectrum from the gross to the subtle to the causal. So, When we talk about a vibration of a thought, we can very well, it's going to follow by principle the same as any material physical thing. Of course, by a thought is by a complete thought is a sentence. And an element of a thought is a word. So we're talking really about the vibration here of words and of sentences in our mind. That when we speak aloud, our words vibrate the air, we call it sound vibrations. But to speak is to think is just to think to speak low. It's to speak within our minds. To speak is to think aloud. And so thinking is just is comparable to speech, only it's more subtle. Same principles hold true. And so we talk about a thought vibration. Well, on one level, we can think, when we just think of the neurochemistry, biochemistry of the brain, we know that thoughts are associated with neuron firings in the brain, and so the biochemistry. But those firings, those that electrical behavior in the brain, when the electric sparks in the brain, that's all about electromagnetism. That causes again and again it sparks. That's vibration. That causes thought waves. And just as when we speak, we create sound waves, carry and propagate our words, so too when we think. Our thoughts vibrate in the chitta, that means in the mind stuff. And the mind stuff is just like material stuff, only it's more subtle. And it propagates through the akasha, that is through the subtle matter of the universe, of this world. And it propagates through space. Now, one of the mysterious effects of thought is the effect that it has on these thought vibrations. One of the mysterious effects that we can see immediately is as it begins to affect our body. And this is one of the principles of the science of mind, that every movement or vibration in the psyche has a corresponding movement and vibration in the physical form. And as an example, let me give you an example here. You know in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, that he often notices, Ramakrishna often notices when devotees come to visit, he often notices things about their physiognomy and their physiology and the physiognomy. And the phrenology, that means the shape kind of the head and the contours and the features of the face and the body. And well, of course, physiognomy and phrenology today are regarded as old-fashioned pseudosciences. But they're nevertheless based on a fundamental truth. And that is that our thoughts, our feelings, influence our physical body. And there is a downward causation. Our thoughts have an influence on our body. We're not saying that our thoughts create matter or create our body, but they influence our body. There is a downward causation. That downward causation is maybe a lot less than you hear about in New Age teachings. Maybe it's less than that, but on the other hand, it's a lot more than was always traditionally thought. And your face is a roadmap of where you've been in your life. And you remember how on one occasion, one of the young disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, his name was Rakal, he came into the room where the master stayed, and Sri Ramakrishna looked at him and he said, "Why is it that you have a shadow over your face?" And the boy at that time, maybe he's 12 years old, he's 14 years old. Sri Ramakrishna says, you have a shadow over your face. Have you been telling lies? And he said, "What? No, I don't tell lies. Why would I tell lies?" And waited. Then he thought, later on he thought, this morning I was talking to my grandma. I told a fib to my grandmother. And so that's the incident. Now, kind of strange. Did Sri Ramakrishna actually see a shadow on his face? No. What it is he's noticed that there's subtle contours, or there's subtle features of the face that maybe were influenced by the thought pattern of the person. And, I'm just giving you these suggestions. You have to process this through your own understanding. Whether you think that it stands to reason. That's kind of my thesis this morning, that these mysterious phenomena cannot be dismissed as mere childish, magical thinking, but that actually have some basis in objective fact. That's my argument. So I guess that's what I'm trying to convince you of. We can think of the mind. Here's another analogy. Think of the mind kind of like a tuning fork. Remember the mind, and we're not talking about the brain, we're talking about the mind. Ordinarily, we think of it as being like something immaterial and spiritual and totally different from matter, whereas the Sankhya's maintain that mind and matter are both prakriti. They're both the same substance. They're just different grades of the substance. So we can think of the mind as like a tuning fork, and we know that when we strike that fork, it begins to resonate, it begins to vibrate. And if there are other tuning forks in the vicinity, they too will begin to vibrate, the sympathetic resonance. And so the fact is that the vibration, as it travels, the vibration has an influence on other material things. There was a man in the olden days, it was around 1800, his name was Chladni. And he was a guy who he did a lot of experiments with vibration. He was interested in the science of vibration. And he did some experiments where he graphically showed how vibration acts upon matter. It doesn't create matter, but it can influence and form and change the patterns of matter. And what he did is he took like a large metal plate and put on that plate a very thin layer of sand. And then with a violin bow, he took the side of that very thin metal plate and he began to play that, like the bow, draw that bow on and that metal plate began to vibrate like a musical instrument, and all of the you can see pictures of this, all of the sand begins to dance around and it starts to form patterns. And the patterns kind of are like represent the reproduce the vibrations of the musical instruments. So similarly it is with our thoughts, that as we begin to think the thoughts, the vibration in the mind, it begins to, the mind-body. As you know, we have 5, yoga psychology tells us we don't have one body, you have 5 bodies. So you begin here with a mind-body. The mind-body begins to vibrate. That in turn will be that's the implicate order. The explicate order now is going to be the mind-body, the energy body. That will begin to vibrate in sympathetic resonance. And then the energy body vibrating, now the gross or physical body will begin in sympathetic vibration will begin, and it also will vibrate. And so that we can see it makes sense that our thoughts would influence that our subtle thoughts influences our gross physical body. It's all a continuous spectrum from the causal to the subtle to the gross. And we can see the influence of our thoughts on our physical body. And the sum total of our thoughts make up what we call a character. And we've discussed that on other occasions when we talk here about the self-image, the composite of all of the sum total of the thoughts and beliefs that you have about yourself. Nothing mysterious about a thought, by the way. You know, what is a thought? A thought is just a sentence. You have sentences in your mind. They're subtle sentences. They're not, you can't hear them, but you hear them when you speak to yourself. The sum total of those beliefs, those sentences express beliefs about reality and about who you are. The sum total of those beliefs represents what you think about yourself. That's your innermost image of your construct of yourself. And just as a thought Like, by the way, a thought is a sentence. A thought is a word. Think of it as maybe like a word. A word is a vibration. Similarly, it is the sum total of the words, the sum total of the sentences itself has a vibration. And your character is vibrating, and it emanates from you like an aura. And there's nothing mysterious, or there's nothing supernatural about auras. We all know that we have a whole, within our body, in our physical, around our physical body, there are layers of envelopes of different layers of well, we can talk about our heat aura. Have you ever take a photograph of a heat print of an object, that we radiate heat, and that although that heat photograph won't show your physical features, but it will show very clearly the presence of your physical body. Around your physical body, there's an aura of heat. And that can be photographed by heat-sensitive cameras. That's why it's weird if you study. Think about police forensics. Say you take a body and you take way out in the forest and you bury the body deep in the ground and you cover it over perfectly well. Yeah, the police can come easily. They just walk through the forest with heat-sensitive cameras, and bam, that spot, which is which to the visible eye, as a naked eye, it looks just like ground. It'll be radiating with heat. The cameras will just be like a huge big spot of red glowing heat. That's the aura of the buried body. It's radiating up through the dirt. Similarly, around our bodies, we have the electromagnetism. We have an aura of their radiation. Each one of us we're radioactive. And there are different kinds of radioactive elements within our body that's constantly radiating electromagnetic energy. We radiate, there's a whole aura of sweat and CO2 and odor around us. As you know, or dogs or anyone say, we maybe can't smell that, but dog can very well smell that. It's because that's an aura that we have around us. And similarly, the yogis maintain that we have around us, we radiate an aura of character. And everything that we touch will take the imprint of our character. And just as when you touch something, you will leave your fingerprint, or you will leave a heat print. Similarly, it is that when you touch something, you will leave the imprint of your character. Now that's a little more esoteric, but it's the same principle. And by touching something, that thing will, by referring now back to the theory of vibration, will begin to vibrate in sympathetic resonance with your character. It will be influenced by your touch. It will, that is, you will leave your mark wherever you go. And this is why the yogis, for example, are so careful, for example, about the food that they eat. Because if your food has been touched and prepared and handled by a person of bad character, the yogis believe that you will imbibe, that will influence your body, and by sympathetic resonance, your energy body and your mind. And that's why they insist, ahara shuddhau sattva shuddhi sattva shuddhau dravasmriti. The Upanishadic verse there, it says, when the food is pure, then the body becomes pure. And when the body is pure, then the mind becomes pure. And when the mind is pure, then the memory becomes firm. That means you can remember your own divine self. So there's some spiritual aspect to the eating of the pure food. As you know, we have different kinds of food, of course. There's physical food, there's emotional food, there's intellectual food, there's spiritual food. The same principles hold true for all of them. And the yogis believe that by eating pure food, that we aid and facilitate our spiritual life. They talk about the different kinds of food, of impurities. They analyze this in great detail. And they talk about the three doshas, the three impurities of food. The first one is called the jati dosha. And that means is that, let's say, for example, someone brought you a glass of water. You asked for a glass of water and they brought you a glass of seawater. It's impotable. That's jati dosha. That means it's just by its very nature. You can't, it's totally, you can't be even purified or processed by the body. Say somebody brought you a glass of water that had all over it greasy fingerprints. Nimitta dosha. That means it's, we would call it unsanitary. We don't want to drink that. It's unsanitary. But there's a third kind of impurity. It's called the ashraya dosha. That's a little bit harder to see. And if you remember, if you read in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, you remember on one occasion he visited the house of the Pandit Shashadhar Tarkachudamani on the day of the car festival. And there, talking with the devotees, he asked for have a glass of water. And a man who had a tilak, Rudraksha beads, and was all dressed up with all of the emblems of religious garb, brought him a glass of water. And Sri Ramakrishna took the glass, put it up to his lip like this. He couldn't drink it. Try, put it down. And then people came and they took the glass away, and someone else brought another glass of water. Sri Ramakrishna took that, he drank it. And people had just thought that maybe something had fallen in the first glass of water. Maybe there was something gotten into it, or nobody even noticed. But Swami Vivekananda at that time, a young man, was sitting nearby. And he'd heard a lot about this ashraya dosha. And there are other incidents in the life of Ramakrishna where he had this hypersensitivity. It was kind of, he couldn't like touch money. You take money, they say the yogis is so pure, he couldn't touch money. Okay, well, he couldn't touch money, but what if somebody came and put a rupee coin under secretly came and put a rupee coin under his mattress. He comes walking in, he sits down, jumps up like he'd been stung by a horned fish. That's hypersensitivity of the mind. The mind is so subtle and so causal that it reacts in such a way. In any case, Swami Vivekananda started thinking. He said, what is that? What happened to the water? Why did you bring the water? There's nothing in the water. That was perfectly, the clean water was clean. What happened? So he made inquiries, and he found, sure enough, that guy with all the Rudraksha beads and the tilak and all of the religious marks, that he had a man of notorious bad character. And so kind of reinforced this idea of the ashraya dosha. This theory of thought vibration, it also explains some other peculiar beliefs of the yogis and of religious students of religion and of people who, for example, in the shrine, in a temple, we every day offer fruits and flowers to the deity. And this offered food, after it's offered, it comes down and is available to be taken as called prasad. It's considered to be blessed food. It's like, now why, and then the question arises, well, what's so great about prasad? Why is prasad holy? Why is that? Now we can give several explanations. What a common sense explanation would be, well, it's food that was offered in the shrine. And so it makes sense, just psychologically. It's associated in your mind with soul, God, and religion and something religious, and therefore you're doing something religious. And but in addition to that, the devotees, there's a whole philosophy behind this, that God has partaken of the food. That God has actually, in some way, actually touched the food. And that therefore the food has come in contact with the divine being, and therefore it's kind of has by sympathetic resonance some vibration. And well, that's the belief. Well, we have something of a similar folk belief when we talk here about food. We say that food is food that is prepared with care and with love, and that's served to us with love and devotion, is food that we can take and find pleasing. Whereas other food that is prepared with a negative attitude and is served with a curse, we feel that it's a curse. I mean, they say, I really love your cook. What is it? Love is the secret ingredient. What does that mean? Well, it means is that food which is prepared with love and care is different somehow. That's our folk belief. And thought pattern, thought vibration. It helps us also to explain somehow why we revere sacred relics. As you know, a relic is just something, which is an object, which is kept as a memorial of a saint or of a holy man. And it's considered to somehow be imbued with the blessing of his character. And sometimes people report that having touched that relic, that they feel some blessing. And so we can ask ourselves, why is it that relics are considered to be holy? Well, there again, like the prasad, it's not just it's an object which is associated with the saint. So just psychologically, it evokes thoughts, and thoughts evoke feelings about that saint. So therefore, it kind of has that association. But that's a psychological explanation. But the yogis maintain that in addition to that, there is some objective fact about the object, and that by touching the relic of the saint, that by some esoteric or sympathetic resonance, that we somehow are influenced by the character of the saint. Well, the thought vibrations explain something to us of what we call the psychosphere of a place. And we know how certain holy places, a holy temple, for example, has what we would refer to as a presence. And the idea is that saints and devotees have meditated there, and they report that they feel a kind of influence of the presence of that place. It's mysterious. That's why I put mysterious in the title. You remember how in the life of Sri Ramakrishna went on pilgrimage with Mathur Babu on a boat trip up the river Ganges to Benares. And in the course of that trip, they passed by a place called Navadvip, which is the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya, the famous saint. And Sri Ramakrishna, in the boat, was coming up the Ganges. With great anticipation, he's waiting to see the village where the saint lived. They came by, there it is, they passed by, he saw there, and usually he would become ecstatic and excited and inspired. But as he passed by Navadvip, he felt nothing at all. The boat continued on, and some short distance up the river, Sri Ramakrishna immediately had a vision of Sri Chaitanya. He went into an ecstatic state and reported how wonderful it was to be in the village of Sri Chaitanya. See, Mathur Babu, they say, well, wait a minute. We passed the village back there. We passed it. How is it you're having you're having this vision now? When we passed that village 5 minutes ago, it's down the river Ganges. I don't know. Nobody could understand that. Well, it turns out later that history tells us that the village of Navadvip, there in the Ganges is always changing. There's the sand shoals, and the Ganges is always kind of shifting and changing its banks. And in fact, there was the old village of Navadvip used to be located upriver. But the Ganges, in the course of time, shifted and changed, and they had to, historical accounts, they moved the village down a river. And the new village of Navadvip remained. So, it kind of confirms here this idea of the psychosphere of the place. Now, there again we have a kind of a mystery, because how is it that a place that is just a location can have a vibration or a psychosphere? Well, you have to remember that according to Sankhya philosophy, a place, you see, what is a place? A place is just it's a space-time, right? It's a chunk of space-time. And a place, it's not just a location, it's not just a space. That is, if you go into outer space and you take a chunk of space-time, you say, okay, but there's nothing in it. But there is something in it. That is, according to Sankhya philosophy, everything is prakriti. Everything that's a chunk of space-time, and even though you can't see in it, just like a Navadvip, all you can see is just nothing. There's nothing left of the village. But there's a subtle village. There's a causal village. And everything has even if the gross level has disappeared, there's a subtle level, and the subtle body, and there's a causal body. So there's no such thing as empty space. Everything is composed of the 5 elements. And so there's something that is still in vibration. That is the saint. It makes sense to think. Now, I'm not offering any mathematical, scientific proof, but what I am saying is that it stands to reason. It's not illogical to think. It's not unreasonable to think that if a saint of a very high order lived in a place, thought high thoughts have vibration. The vibration affected the trees and the rocks and the dirt. That's the gross. And if the saint were to live there for a long time, that vibration, we could imagine, would affect the subtle space of that and the causal space. And that even after the saint passed away, and even after the trees and the rocks and the buildings passed away, similarly the vibration would remain in the subtle space. Remember the thesis here of the law of vibration. Everything is like a bell. It's like everything that is struck rings. Everything a rock is struck, it rings. And you know how it rings, when you ring something, it rings your ears. You hear a loud ringing in your ears and the bell goes away, your ears keep ringing. And even after the object is gone, even after the saint is dead and long gone, even after the village is removed, still that place rings with his presence. You can detect the presence. Well, there's like a Klingon warship, Star Trek or Star. It's cloaked. It disappears, and now the warship. First it's there, it appears, then it cloaks, then it's disappeared. Now it's gone. And how do you even know that it was there? That's because it leaves a warp signature in space. Space is warped there, and they can detect there that there was a ship there. So, similarly it is the yogis. The yogis, we can imagine, establish tirthas. That means a holy place where a saint lives, becomes a holy place. And the saint meditating there creates a psychosphere. And that psychosphere can be increased by others who come there and also meditate in that same place. And because they say that when you begin to these wave forms, if you have two waves, they can begin to lock into phase, and they remain at the same frequency, but the amplitude increases. And so that in a place that it has a certain vibration, that others come and also meditate there and think high thoughts, that the amplitude of that subtle vibration would increase. Makes sense. And that's kind of the principle of the high fidelity amplifier. So we can understand then that why devotees visit holy places. Because by visiting a holy place, when you sit and you meditate, it's easier to meditate there. Because you're getting the benefit of all of the others who have visited that place before you. The vibrations of thought affect our body, affect the things around us. Not only that, they carry to even a distant, to a greater distance. And just as a stone that's thrown into a pond of water will make a splash, and the little ripples will have a ripple effect. They'll radiate outward. And they'll radiate and radiate. And they'll keep radiating on forever. If you had an infinite pond, those ripples would just keep going on and radiating on forever. A conservation of energy. And that's why Swami Vivekananda, in volume 4, he says, I'll read to you a quote, if a man goes into a cave and shuts himself up and thinks one really great thought and dies. He goes in a cave, he thinks one really great thought and dies. That thought will penetrate the walls of the cave, vibrate through space, and at last permeate the whole human race. So that's our talk this morning about the phenomena associated with the law of human vibrations. In our study of the lives of the saints, we're going to come across many such subtle vibrational phenomena. And so hopefully we've done a little bit to think about these, to demystify them, to rationalize them, to explain them, and to make sense of these claims. And understanding, I think, the background beliefs will help us to more to appreciate the reported experiences of the saints, and will help us to open our minds to consider the possibility of subtle and causal levels of reality, and maybe even to better understand our own personal experiences in spiritual life. Om Dio Shanti Antariksha Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.